Hi, John here with another Any Creative Entrepreneur's Journey. And this time we've got Jeff Glass, who's about to launch a children's series to basically prepare the next generation of entrepreneurs. Before we dive into the story of this series that Jeff is working on, Jeff, maybe you could talk a little bit about what is it that lights you up each day? What is it that kind of really gets you going?
Well, thanks, John. Thanks for having me on the show. I've been working in the field of entrepreneurship for a while. I started out as a serial entrepreneur. My background is in psychology and working with kids. And I started out in LA working with kids in autism, different programs down there. Got away from working with kids for a long time, had kids of my own, opened me back up to seeing the importance of teaching our children really these qualities that I'd learned about being raised as an entrepreneur since I was about 5 years old around my grandfather, who was, my my exposure at that time was driving around seeing him pick up checks. And I'm like, I want to drive around and pick up
Hmm.
checks when I'm adult. So, I realized there was a lot more to it, but it was an early exposure to seeing what it was like to be self-employed. And so I got into working with kids and started writing curriculum on entrepreneurship, providing as a service to the schools. There's a lot of trend right now in teaching entrepreneurship and how can we teach our kids to not only go get a job, but to create jobs. So I wrote curriculum for several years and branched out and thought, well, what if we could package this a little bit differently for kids at their level? So I started writing a children's book series. I never wrote it for an audience. I didn't write it because I wanted to just start selling children's books. I wrote it for myself and I wrote it for my kids. And I thought this is a really cool platform. I read my son a children's book every single night, and I thought, you know what, teaching about other stuff besides potty training and how to go camping or play at the park. These are all great books. Dr. Seuss is one of my favorites, but I thought, what if we really taught kids some core principles that they could unpack in life, but actually start applying right now?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I feel is missing, and really, I wish I had that as a kid, because I felt like, in a way, like kind of, like I had these ideas for, like my own business and all that, but really, like there was nothing at my level. There was either the extreme of like these books about stocks and investing, that kind of thing,
Mhm.
or accounting, or like kind of businessy kind of books and stuff like that, or children's books. I mean, that was like the two extremes it seemed like that was really available and stuff. So absolutely would have loved to have a series like you're talking about. Uh, Before you got started into that, like what like you mentioned your grandfather and stuff like that. Was he like a source of inspiration of like this entrepreneurship? Like kind of like what was it about him? Like besides the collecting the checks and all that, what was it about him that really motivated you to kind of like look more deeply, or to kind of like to want to learn more about like what he was doing?
Not just not, That's a great question, and I'll get into that. But it was multifaceted. It wasn't just learning about what he was doing, but really how he lived.
Mm.
He would take me to the movies. He'd take me to lunch. When a lot of people were at a job during the day, he worked hard. Don't get me wrong. Entrepreneurs work a lot of hours, but he was able to take those breaks. He was really ambassador of his own time, and that I didn't know any different. I didn't understand
Mm.
this concept that you would go to a job, have a boss, and they would be in charge of your time. And that's the
Wow.
right position for a lot of people. But growing up and having exposure to that, and my grandfather is really the American story. He was Navy guy, started out as a milkman, became a building inspector for schools and hospitals, sat on San Jose Unified School District, and just he really worked his way up. So everything from manual labor, blue collar, to running a business and being a real estate investor. So he was a serial entrepreneur. So that really started to chart the path and influence me. And I think that's really the concept that I'm after this with the book series too. Is it's not just for teachers; it's for parents and mentors. You talk a lot to, I'm sure you do a lot to different entrepreneurs. A lot often they'll point back to a parent, an uncle, a mentor, a grandfather, somebody that showed them early on that started planting that seed. School has its place; it teaches us a lot of different skills, but I found that entrepreneurship can almost always be traced back to learning from a person.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That I actually took courses for my MBA in entrepreneurship and stuff, and really I found that even in the course itself and the materials and everything, it was the stories of the individuals. It was people who, like on other courses that I took, where we got to the personal histories, the what the people themselves did. That was really what I felt I learned the most from. Not so much from like kind of principles, or we had, of course, accounting or finance or these different content courses and stuff. But it was definitely the personal stories. And then I often shared the story of one of my mentors, Dave, who he passed away a number of years ago and stuff, but he was an inspiration because of just by living the example, and so I think along that lines though is that was there kind of things that really you felt just being around him that like besides kind of I'm getting that sense of the freedom and stuff, but was there other kind of habits of the way he interacted with people, or the things that kind of just from watching him more directly that you felt you really kind of took on then?
I'd love to say so, and I'd like to say with my grandfather, I'm really glad I was his grandson rather than somebody else. Totally honest, he wasn't the nicest guy, and I'm not saying that was something to model, and I definitely want to put him down for it. I think all of us have different personalities,
Right.
and I definitely have much more, I think, of a laid back personality with people than he did. But he was very much like an aggressive police officer with his job, and more into how can I write somebody up for something when he was doing inspections. He was always great to me, so I give credit where credit is due. So in
Right.
some ways, but I started to see that maybe I could do this, but I can do it in my own fashion, which is
Mm,
which is I believe core to the entrepreneurial mindset as well.
definitely.
You may have felt with your mentor is okay. So Dave is showing you all these great things, but you're probably not exactly the same print of him.
Yeah,
We learn to
absolutely.
make our own print. So seeing his interaction with people, it's something to learn from. Well, I don't know if that I want that to be my interaction, but uh, I want to have my own style, and I've always had a very personable approach with people, and use that as my platform for engaging.
Yeah, I think that's so true that like what people or the news stories or magazines, whatever, it tends to kind of sell is that a prototype, or kind of where you have to have either the .com startup kind of personality, whatever, to be an entrepreneur. And I absolutely agree that there is no one style, there is no one personality.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one thing I've learned from years of working with different entrepreneurs, it's different levels of education, different ages. I mean, you have people as young as Mark Zuckerberg, but then you have folks as old as Colonel Harlan Sanders, who started his first business when he was in his 60s and stuff. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, it just all shapes and sizes. And I think to me, what I take out of that is entrepreneurship is really about being about that you can be an entrepreneur as an extension or a bring out into the world, you who you are. Like in other words, your business then is really allowing to take shape, kind of what that looks like as your gift or your expression of business in the world. So I think based on that, then you've kind of developed your ideas and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So then I mean, of course, what seems like the thing then is oh, you've got it all figured out, but that's not the reality, is it? So what kind of, can you talk a little bit about kind of after you start having these, for example, even the children's book and stuff, you have the ideas and stuff. Then what kind of challenges have you faced, kind of starting to bring your expression of entrepreneurship into the world?
It's amazing because when we get to a certain age, we think of ourselves as, teachers of children, but it's not long ago that we were kids, you know,
Yeah.
and I tried to get myself back at that platform of I'm older, but I'm not a kid. I wasn't a kid that long ago. But just because of that, it doesn't mean that I understand these kids. So I've actually learned a lot from my students, and I had a student set me straight. He came up to me after I
Hmm.
was teaching a class, and he says to me, and he goes, I don't think you understand us, Mr. Glass. You talk to us like we're 30, 40-year olds. He goes, we're kids.
Wow.
And we want to be taught as we're kids. And I have allowed for this type of culture. It wasn't a typeset classroom. I've come in as a guest teacher. I'm not a credentialed teacher. I'm, somebody that writes curriculum. So coming in and listening to his feedback, it really actually set me on a right track. I was a little disappointed to hear this. I thought I was reaching them a little bit better, but that really got me on a starting path of learning and leaning into my audience. And I think that's been my biggest obstacle and challenge, but I think there's been small victories on that. I'm still learning. I think that's a challenge for a lot of people And I think in entrepreneurship we have this idea, but how do we communicate it? How do we get this idea across? And it's, being a married guy, I've had to learn what's my wife's language, and the way that I talk to her about something, I have to say things a certain way. It's not always going to come across the way I want it to. And almost 9 years into this, I'm still learning. And I think that's the way I'm learning about this is like, look, I was a kid. I get that, but I'm still a student. I'm learning from my students, and then really learning where the kids are from. And I'm 37 years old. What I was taught as an entrepreneur is make a lot of money. And, maybe when you're a little older, like Bill Gates and Melinda, they go donate some money, their own education, help malaria, save the world. But, go make your money, go make a lot of wealth yourself first. This generation, a couple generations I'm teaching, they're very different. They're uniquely, their approach is very unique compared to what I consider my generation.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting as well. Like you talked about the idea of learning from your students and stuff, and that's absolutely like kind of it applies to so much of entrepreneurship because we can basically put what we think we want, like they want out into the world, and
Mm-hmm.
the fact, like kind of the whole Steve Jobs things about like where like how do you show people what they didn't know they wanted and stuff, and that's a great part of entrepreneurship. But the reality too is that like there's the other part that we need to get the feedback, and like kind of it's interesting that students said that because often what we think is the case is that like we need to make sure we don't talk down to kids, but that there you have an like almost the opposite case and stuff like that where you had to like kind of really talk more at a level that's appropriate to a younger child and stuff, and that was great for them to kind of the child to give you that feedback and stuff.
Right.
And then now like to take that on and to adapt it to what you're doing and stuff like that, that's the entrepreneurship, that's the real work and stuff, to kind of
Right.
take that feedback, because I think what I see as like kind of the difference between an amateur and a pro is that the amateur kind of does something and like kind of like they may learn, may not, and stuff like that. But the pro is the one who like is committed to learn. That like the learning doesn't stop and stuff. And I think that's
Right.
really where the difference is. So okay, as you've kind of taken this feedback and everything, as you're now kind of adapting to it, what what kinds of things do you see like where as you're now launching and stuff like that? What is your game plan for like kind of basically as you've now kind of creating the series, you're raising the funds and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So what does that look like in terms of the next step then of like kind of putting the work out into the world?
Yeah, so a couple answers to what you're saying there. So in this discovery of my audience, I think there is an evolution happening with entrepreneurship, and I don't know if we're entirely seeing it. I don't think I was entirely seeing it, and
Hmm.
it's evolving more into social entrepreneurship because
Okay.
of the group that's stepping out there. My group, again, back to my generation, I'm Gen X, I think, and so we were taught, be wealthy and make money and then give.
Hmm.
This group is more flipped. They're more interested in the kids I've worked with. I mean, I'm talking a large majority of how can I be generous first, and then if I make money, cool. But I really want to, if I'm Zuckerberg's age or younger, I'm thinking, how can I actually just be in a cool part of society, do something that's impactful, and then if I make money, then that's great. So I started tailoring my books toward my audience. My number one
Hmm.
audience, again, being myself, my kids. What am I really looking for to achieve victory as far as education in my home? But then I started unpacking these principles and thinking, all right, are these just theory or are these things that actually make an organization work? So I was looking at successful organizations and how they run. And I found that the book, so it's a 7-book series. First book is generosity, then you have courage, teamwork, leadership, stewardship, uh, you have honor, and then you have creativity or innovation. So I found that these aren't the only components, but these are core components that make up a successful organization. Major corporations to the United Way or the Boys and Girls Club, it really doesn't matter the type of business. It's teaching these kids at a young age. Here are some values that you can bring to the company that you're going to start, to the company that you're going to work for. The reality is, John, not all these kids are going to become entrepreneurs, but all of them can think like entrepreneurs. So my entry point and I'm on the continuum of teaching this area, is the entrepreneur mindset. The financial literacy and the accounting. How many guests do you have on your show that are accountants that are successful entrepreneurs? You know,
Right.
it's a necessary thing. Like much like in marriage, you got to have the accounting, you got to have the financial literacy. It's part of marriage, but it doesn't make up the whole thing. It can
Right.
wreck the marriage, but it's really it's not this focal point to make a relationship or a business healthy long term. It's necessary. So a lot of these entrepreneur programs out there are really business programs, and those aren't
Mm-hmm.
synonyms. Entrepreneurship is, so if I'm in a business, I'm running a company, but if I'm an entrepreneur, if the business fails or goes away, I'm still an entrepreneur. But if I
Right.
have just a business mindset and the business goes away, I don't have anything. I have a business
Yeah.
mindset. So no matter where you plant me, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Same with these kids. I want wherever I plant them, they're thinking like that. And then I've received feedback too. Well, are you teaching kids that, something that's an option not to go to college or anything like that? Absolutely not. Couple reasons. One, some of the greatest entrepreneurial ideas happen in college. Back to Zuckerberg again. A lot of people that we hear of successful today, they happen in the college think tank, or they happen at the job. Great ideas were birthed at Atari. So you think about where the spark happens. So I started thinking about entrepreneurship on a continuum. Where is it starting? It's starting in the home. Then it's going into the schools. Then it's going to the job or college and so forth. So I found the best thing, if I'm going to plant one things with these kids, is give them the mindset that's going to give them a great life then and as an outcome later. So the platform for the books is really, we're trying to fundraise right now to get the artwork done. That's what the Indiegogo campaign is for. We want to make these books available both also internationally, has been a new vision that's been birthed in here, but at least through the U.S. And we've available to the parents, mentors, and schools.
Yeah, I think what you said there really resonates with me is the idea of a continuum that and I absolutely agree as well. That's not as though and that's been my thing about it, that like when I'm talking to indie creatives and creative entrepreneurs and stuff, I'm not talking about everyone should be a writer or everyone should be a filmmaker or like it's basically that like um, that different times you can express yourself
Hmm.
in a way in the world that like most meets where you are, like kind of in other words, like maybe you are just working for different at a different job and stuff like that, or maybe you're in school and stuff, and that's right now where you are and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean you can't do something entrepreneurial. That doesn't mean you can't do something creative and stuff. And then
Hmm.
if you can combine those two, that's to me like kind of really what I try to encourage people to do is like basically find out what it is that like is your thing and stuff like that. And if there is a way to make money doing it, then absolutely and stuff. But if it's the thing that like it doesn't have to be like suddenly just quitting your job or quitting school and stuff like that. That doesn't have to be like kind of all or nothing. It's like you said, a continuum and stuff. So along with that, then along with kind of the idea of like, I think you and I talked about it before, that like even though the final person a lot of times reading it will be a child, or ideally have it read to them and stuff like that, or but the thing is though, like really your customer in a way is the parents and stuff. So that's an interesting kind of aspect of the project and everything. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how like you see in terms of the challenges or the opportunities of like reaching parents and stuff?
That's a good question. And if you don't mind, I want to comment on something you said as well.
Sure.
And so I believe that we're all designed for something,
Mm,
regardless of your religious belief system or what it is. I think we're designed for something unique. I think we're designed to bring something, to contribute something to this world. And that's one of my objectives with these kids is to get them to see that they are valuable. But so let's look at it this way. So if I was to come pick you up in Southern California and let's say, hey, we're going to go on a boating trip to San Francisco. So we're going to go get the best vehicle possible. We're going to push a boat all the way up to the bay. We're not going to take a car. People are going to look at us like, you should take a car. A car is designed to pull the boat. It would look ridiculous
mm,
to people. And I think it looks a little ridiculous when somebody's doing something that they're not designed to do. But let
mm,
me add a point to that. There, before something becomes a boat or becomes a car, becomes what it's supposed to be in life or whatever it is, there's assembly line, there's schooling, it doesn't look like a car the whole time. So we might go
Mm,
work that job where we have to work as a stock boy or a stock lady or work as a cashier or do something this is not what I was meant to do. But I teach the students, maybe it's leading to something you're supposed to do. One of the most successful companies I've ever owned is a janitorial company.
mm,
And I point that out to students. I'm like, I graduated college and now I own a janitorial business, but I learned so many things from that company that I still utilize today. So I wanted to bring that point with what you said because you're bringing up something very valuable. As far as the parents, I looked at it this way. I look at the schools and there's so much emphasis put on the schools and they're great. They're the super highways of information, but that's where the
mm,
population already is. So if I was, to me, just focusing on the schools is like evangelizing Christianity to the mega churches. They already have a population. They already have a culture going on there. The education is already flowing going. You can add something to it, but there's so much in the community on the periphery. So we've taken a step back and looked at the bigger picture, saying we want to focus on the community. So here's what
mm,
I came up with. Where does education start? And education starts with the parents. Think about a driver's test. If I'm going to take a driver's test, education does not start at the test. It doesn't even start at
right.
driver's school. Where does it start, John? It
Yeah.
starts with mom or dad teaching
Boom,
how to drive
yeah.
stick shift, or uncle or mentor or what.
Absolutely.
That's so education starts with the parents. I have some kids that become entrepreneurs at my program, and they're all pointing back to somebody that besides me, and that's fine. I don't need the credit. The credit is due to them, but they'll point back to somebody that taught them before me, that planted the seed. So
Right.
these books, I want to put parents, they already are. I want to raise awareness that parents are in the driver's seat of their child's education, and school is the next stage. Then the other important thing is, where is education going? So you go to grade school, you go to high school, you go to college, and then you go to job, right? Are we taught what that next step is, or just kind of fall off the cliff?
Mm,
Now these kids graduate and where do I go? What am I
mm,
supposed to have a network? I mean, how do I actually apply some of these things that I've learned? So I've learned to put a heavy emphasis on where is education headed, and it's headed to the marketplace. So I've matched these principles with successful companies saying, I'm going to teach these now. We're going to start with parents. The kids are going to go through school. They're probably going to work some jobs. They're going to go to college most likely. And then they're going to go in the marketplace and already be aware of what makes this place successful because it's successful within them. So that's why you gotta look at where things begin, and you gotta look at where things are going. And schools are this amazing middle piece.
yeah.
We got to think bigger.
Yeah, I think the key there also is the fact that like, in which like different times, Ken Robinson talks about that the
I like
schools was designed for another era and stuff, and really that's been part of the problem is that like, that the era that they were designed for is gone. I mean, we're in the information age and stuff, and yet like kind of the basic ideas, the basic kind of ways schools are structured was for the assembly line, for this industrial age mentality and stuff, and really like kind of what we need to do is basically, we're certainly not going to be able to change the school system overnight, but I think what we can do in this in the meanwhile is basically to do these things of like kind of having like you said, the teaching at home where it starts, as you've talked about,
Mhm.
and really kind of build from that level up and stuff, and I definitely see that, like, I mean, in the past there's been things like little movements and different kind of things like these clubs and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's got to kind of just keep building on that, like where like kind of whether it's a after school program or like kind of like different you know organizations that's structured around that, and who knows, like kind of, I mean, it's hard to say how what you're doing will be involved with that. Actually, you did, I did see one article, and that where it talked a little bit about like what you have done before. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, about your own experiences with organizations who have set up these other programs to kind of like, you know as an alternative way to kind of basically raise awareness about entrepreneurship, to basically promote it to the youth and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about like your previous work in with nonprofits doing that?
Yeah. So with the schools, and I've been on both sides of this, and I've really sort of arrived in the middle and said, you know what? I'm going to be Switzerland with this. I'm going to really be neutral in a lot of ways, but I'm going to be somebody that's, I want to be a resource for the schools, for the parent.
Mm,
But the school system, what you're talking about, the assembly line, it's the Horace Mann model of, let's get them, turned out for manufacturing. And that manufacturing model still exists today. We're not in the industrial revolution anymore. I am in Carson City right now, and that's, we are in a manufacturing hub. So
mm,
here it does make a little sense, but it probably doesn't make sense where you are,
right.
as much as it does here. So, but you'll see the same type of school system throughout the U.S. Here's my thing is I had a student tell me, and I was explaining to him about how entrepreneurs, we innovate, we come up with these ideas, and he comes up to me and he goes, "So, Mr. Glass, you're telling me that a creative answer could be a right answer?" And that broke my heart, because that told me that we are missing the mark. It doesn't
Mm,
mean that school's bad. It means that schools are stopping on third base. Triple's great, but entrepreneurship and showing them where all this leads to helps round it out and bring it home. So I don't want to come in and change the school system. I think the system provides some valuable things. I want to come in and just add to it and say, look, this is everything that you're doing. Here's what we add to the recipe to make it have a great turnout that the students actually love, that they value. So the foundation I was with before in Carson City, we looked at various programs, and I ended up actually writing my own. One of the greatest programs I found out there was
mm,
Junior Achievement. I
hmm.
think they've done great things.
Right.
Right, right up your alley, like you were talking about, learning about your MBA, financial literacy. It's a lot of banking. It's good stuff. But again, the thing that I found that was missing was the entrepreneur mindset.
Mm,
So the nice thing about being with the foundation is I actually got to go in. It was such a privilege. I got to go in and beta test some of the things that I was writing and learning with these kids, and started gathering information. And while I was doing that, I was invited by the juvenile justice system to write an entrepreneur program for them. That really pulled at my heartstrings, and now they basically mandated a program for the kids in order to go through their juvenile probation, that they have to go through this entrepreneurship program. So
hmm.
we've had a blast doing that. So, but as much as I had a great job and they're taking care of me, it was one of those things. Going from job to entrepreneur is one amazing dynamic.
Mm,
Going from entrepreneur to job is a whole different story. So I described it as, it's kind of like being 35, moving back home with mom and dad. They're great mom and dad. You
mm.
get to use the car. They give you money, but you miss your one bedroom shabby apartment because it felt like it was yours, even though it's an
Right.
apartment. So for me, it was a time and space. It was a season, but I had more of a larger vision of, I wanted to see something spread throughout my state.
Mm,
I've had great success working everything from young kids to politicians with this program, but I want to see it something that ripples even further beyond. So the foundation I was with was very much focused on my city, which I have a lot of love for. It's my home.
mm. Yeah, I think that's the thing where, we're on one hand, we do need organizations, whether it's junior achievement or, like a civic kind of thing, and where, it provides some structure for a community, for the needs of that, community and stuff. But on the other, like you said, then that's also limiting, right? Which is, again, gets to the difference between entrepreneurship and working for a company or something else and stuff, like another situation is like that. um, Most companies aren't really designed for you to be entrepreneurial. I mean, that's just not the nature of it. it's
Right.
it's like a competing kind of desires. They want stability because, like, it's better for their accounting. Even if a company wants to like grow year after year, it's
Mm-hmm.
still not designed for like rapid growth. It's still not designed for like expanding missions and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of, that's just the nature of, a company. But at the same time, like, I think what's interesting also is that, like, that different times the needs mesh, and where, like, kind of like you said, for a while that was the place for you to be, and that was what was interesting then, for you to kind of experience that and to see firsthand what they needed and stuff. So I think that's the kind of the thing that we have to each decide for ourselves, is like, at one point, does that make sense to work with, a organization, or to, you know fall under somebody else's umbrella, so to speak, and stuff like that. And at what point do we need to kind of branch out and do our own thing and everything?
Right.
So it seems like you kind of were clear that like you needed to expand your mission and stuff. And then have you found that like people, wow, like kind of that's resonated with them, and then they want to be part of what you're doing now and stuff like that? In other words, did in fact, like the minute you declared that, did that kind of start bringing things, like kind of into your realm or into your sphere that like you weren't even aware were available to you?
When I made the transition back into entrepreneurship, is that what you're
Yeah,
referring
yeah.
to? I did, and this really ties into my title of my website, of my blog, which is breakingbannister.com. Is I'm teaching these kids entrepreneurship, but here I am. I got this cushy job. I'm well taken care of. I can't pay for a pen without them reimbursing me, right? They're loving on me. It was a wonderful place to be an employee, but it wasn't a place to be an entrepreneur for me, but also for my students, because I realize one of the most important things that's actually missing in our education system is modeling. We've extracted out the idea that we learn so much when somebody shows us something. So by me going independent almost a year ago, this is me actually starting to teach my students. This is me showing them, hey, this is how it's done. This is how you walk through it. So you're breaking up a little bit there, John. Are you still there?
Yeah, it kind of froze up for a second.
Are we freezing here?
Yeah, it looks like we're back though. Yeah, and that'll happen once in a while. So, anyways.
Okay. So if I can unpack what I learned is I really adopted the style of teaching. And one of my favorite people, I love history. I didn't love it while I was in school. I fell in love with history after school for some reason, but I downright hated it when I was in school. But I read it I read it all the time now. So um, Roger Bannister set out to break the 4-minute mile. And here's what's interesting. He didn't say I can break the 4-minute mile. He said mankind can break the 4-minute mile. And here's a part of the story, you hear about the part where he's told it's impossible, your heart's going to give out, your lungs can't take it. And he didn't write a great story, John. He didn't do a YouTube blog. He showed people,
Right.
he actually showed them how it was done. And that changed people's belief systems. But here's what you don't hear about the story very much. He ran it with 3 of his closest friends. Entrepreneurship is not an island. It's a team effort. It's ran with other people. And the other thing is that he actually inspired others to do the same. I think it was almost 600 people who quickly broke his record. So what if we approach our education system that way? What if the goal for me being an entrepreneur is for people to get there past the finish line quicker, faster, better than me? But I have to go do what? I have to go first. I have to show them that it's possible. And for me, that's what Breaking Bannister is all about. It's about breaking the impossible. But so when I quit my job, well, it's not this huge act of courage or this and that. I got kids. It's I'm a person. You're a little fearful. You're a little faithful. And I'm just real with my students. But I let them know that that's normal. This is what you actually go through when you're stepping through it. And most successful entrepreneurs, you can read their memes or their testimonies. It's a rocky road. And when they really stepped into what you're designed to do, you're taking that leap of faith. I was listening to Steve Harvey talk about it's like jumping out and waiting for that parachute to open. You're waiting for it to open. It will open, but you got to jump. And so for me, leaving job and going back into entrepreneurship was jumping. And the possibilities and the people that have assembled around this idea, I have an amazing team. So you and I are doing an interview right now, but there are huge ambassadors on my team to push my vision forward. Not even only locally, but statewide, people in other states that are really helping get this idea out there. But I have to lead it in such a way that I have faith that it's going to work out. I have faith that stepping into something, I was full of BS, John. If I'm teaching kids, follow your passion, do what you love. And I've worked the safe job. And a lot of the entrepreneur stuff I've done in the past were sort of the low hanging fruit. I'm going to do this one because it makes a lot of money. Well, so in a lot of ways, and my wife won't agree with me because she's married to a crazy entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur for the very first time because I'm really stepping out into what I'm supposed to be doing. I've wanted to be a writer since I was a kid, but I always put on the shelf, so to speak. Now stepping into it saying, Let's see what happens. Let's give this a whirl and put everything into it. And I think it takes that. Steve Jobs talks about that. You got to be passionate. It's not going to work. It's going to die if you don't have that passion in you keeping it alive. So, John, that's a whole nother video. I can unpack so much there.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I appreciate, kind of you sharing that of, where you're committing to it and really, going all in. I mean, that's one of the things that like we hear more and more as the expression and stuff. And different times I talk about that with poker that like, it's at some point we all go all in. I mean, that's, whether you choose to do that like on like your first hand, or you choose to do that and, like kind of your like kind of the nth hand and stuff like that. And I think that's the thing that like, until you're willing to commit to that, it's like really, you won't really see the results of like kind of what it means to be all in and stuff like that.
Right.
So what would you say those kind of like helped you to, like really get that courage or that the resilience to kind of, to commit to that? Like what is it that's kind of helped you to have that to kind of go all in though?
Everything from narrative or stories to actually seeing it happen in my own life and knowing that when I've taken those leaps of faith, it does work. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had experience in doing this before. My second children's book, without giving too much spoiler here, John, is called Andrew and the Elephant. And it's all about the life of Andrew Carnegie. And it's based on a true story. And Andrew Carnegie was basically trying to get out this idea of steel bridges, which does not sound like a crazy idea to us today, but
Right.
that was a novel concept. So he's all in, like you're talking about, poker chips all down, puts everything in. He's totally in debt. It's not only his money, but other people's money. And he cannot get people to cross this bridge. And if he doesn't sell this idea of a bridge, he's going to be broke. It's not going to work. So he remembers a childhood story. His mom taught him that an elephant would never cross a surface that's not secure. So Andrew Carnegie rented an elephant and had it cross the bridge, and the rest is history. And he became one of the richest people in the world. So my point is that story really unpacks courage. We have to find that one thing that we are just willing to do. And sometimes we're all alone. We don't have our cheerleaders with us. We don't have our champions, pushing us along. So for me, I think the great pastor John Wayne said, courage is saddling up while you're scared, whatless, right? So that's really the idea of it is we've taught that courage is sort of this absence of fear. It's walking through the fear and knowing you're going to have fears. Entrepreneurs aren't going to tell you this because we don't, but I'll be transparent as we're scared. Sometimes we don't know if this is going to work out, but we do it anyway. We take the chance, we take the risk. I've owned 12 businesses in my life. Not all of them have succeeded, but some have. Baseball player that bats 300 makes $1 million. So he's only hitting it 3 out of 10 times, right? So we have to step up to the plate. We have to have belief. I think entrepreneurs have a high level of faith that this is going to work out. This is going to go somewhere. But it's always a battle. I haven't arrived at this point like, wow, I've done this so many times. I'm just totally convinced it's always going to work. You go through it each time.
Yeah, I definitely think that's part of it where, we talked a little bit about what separates entrepreneurs from employees. And I think that is one of the key traits is the willingness to step up at bat and to see like kind of what it's like to be going all in and stuff. I think, like, a employee can be entrepreneurial and like be willing to kind of to try different things and stuff, but I think until they're willing to kind of basically commit to something, then they're not really fully an entrepreneur, like kind of in that sense and stuff. And what's like the best way for folks to learn more about like the children's book, and what's like kind of like I understand that there's a campaign launching and stuff, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. I get so into the story, the narrative of it. That's the exciting part, but it's great because these books are a product of that. So my website, people can check me out. They can follow me on breakingbannister.com.
Yep.
They can also find that on my Facebook fan page, Breaking Bannister. So that's going to be revealing. So right now, what we're doing is we're running a Indiegogo campaign to get all of the artwork out there. And now I have a little bit of a different approach to the artwork. So this isn't, and I love Dr. Seuss and I love the Peanuts books and all that. This is a little different. So if I really had to give it a true definition, it's more of youth books, because there is no youth book. So I had to pick children's books as a name of what I'm put category or genre I'm putting this under is, but it's really for anywhere from the 3-year-old to the 12-year-old and for the parent. And I found a really unique way to appeal to my audience, and the way that I loved it was having very realistic looking pictures. One of our artist consultants that helps out with a lot of our pictures, real life pictures of animals, different wildlife. Like the first book is Jesse and the Lion's Share, all about generosity, play on words there. And it's all about my son, who's the main character in this interaction with the lion. So we have actual pictures of lions. We have actual pictures of my son.
Okay.
We pieced everything. We're piecing everything together, so it has more of this Life of Pi type look rather than a cartoon look to it. So one of my artists is, I'll put a name out there. Her name is Val Warner. You can check out valwarner.com. She's an amazing nature artist. So she's the one helping drive a lot of the artwork that we're doing. And so a lot of them have animals. Not all of them do. But we wanted to give them more of a realistic look. So the campaign is launching on my son's birthday, which is my favorite character and main character. And so it'll be launching on September 13th by 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Okay.
And the campaign is going to run for about 60 days. At that point, we finish up all the production. And our first book should be available on Amazon on December end of the year. December 2016 is our goal, the very latest January, and the rest of the children's book series will roll out in 2017. But the bonus that comes with it is there is a manual for parents to guide these as a learning tool for students to help unpack these different principles. So I've made the children's book interactive, and that's to come down the road too of a digital component that we're going to be doing it. That's not all for this campaign, but we're going to actually make it available to make it more modern as well. I myself like the hardcover copy books. I like both. So we're going to make both available.
Nice.
So Indiegogo.com, if you key in the children's book series, you should be able to find it. And then on there, we have cool perks. You can get a signed book from me. You can get your name featured in the book for a certain amount. And we're already getting tremendous support from friends and family and our larger network on keeping this campaign going.
Awesome, Jeff. Yeah, listening, hearing about the success of the campaign. And yeah, thanks for coming in and sharing your story and stuff. So that's all for this time, and we'll definitely look forward to sharing more about the campaign on the show notes and more details in our social media as well.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.